next we are going to be hearing from ReGen, who is going to be helping to deal with the plastic pollution problem. We have Richard McAree from ReGen. Thank you so much, Richard, for joining us. And I think we can get rolling with your presentation.
Thank you, Eden. Thank you, Rita and the Cayman Connection team for inviting me back today. Rita's actually going to drive the presentation for me today, so I appreciate that.
Can you all see it?
We can, yeah.
Yep. Okay.
Yep. So essentially, based on today's program, I've really broken it down into three constituent parts, where ReGen really is looking to generate an impact. One is on the remediation of the existing landfill and an update on that. One is an update on the ReGen project, what it is and how we're progressing with that. And then finally, the Rethink Waste campaign, which is still in development, but a number of you on this call certainly participated in that as consultees in a number of the sessions that were carried out earlier in the year. And that's really focusing at the, I guess, even further up the waste hierarchy around the reduce, reuse, recycle side of things, and generating what we hope will end up being a national campaign to really maximize the message and really get that side of waste management moving forward in Ireland with significant community buy-in. So if we can move through to the next slide, please, Rita. The dump, Mount Trashmore, Georgetown landfill, whatever way you want to call it, has obviously been a fairly significant blight on the Cayman landscape for quite some period of time. I'm pleased to say that progress of remediation of what we call the North Mound is progressing on time and to schedule. Hannah showed an image earlier in her presentation. This is one that, this is the most recent drone image I have, but it's fair to say things have moved on significantly, even since this image, which was taken in June. In very basic terms, the landfill is being capped with a geosynthetic clay liner. Two aspects of that is, firstly, significant reduction of surface water infiltration through the waste mass, which generates the leachate and creates its own environmental problems. Second of all, it generates essentially a capture balloon of the landfill gas. We're currently installing a network of the gas management system through a lattice of pipe work that you might just be able to see some of those the little stacks coming out of the landfill there, those little pipes. Those will be all interconnected and initially go into a flare-based system, which will flare the methane. Yes, you're still generating carbon dioxide, but obviously it's a much reduced climate impact gas. Ultimately, this gas management system will be connected into the energy recovery facility as an additional fuel. So really looking to generate the benefit of that. Certainly of the capped areas of the landfill, we're seeing significant environmental improvement in and around the site, be it based on odor. Clearly, we're removing any opportunity for pests, mosquitoes, those sorts of things. And obviously the gas management system is an important aspect of that. At present, we are now laying topsoil on the site. It's true to say that some of these very heavy rains that we've had, even in the early hours of this morning and over the last couple of weeks, don't help with this process, but it's something we just got to deal with this time of year in the Cayman Islands. So this program of works is essentially on schedule, with the main soiling of the mound and aspects of that being completed by the end of this year, and the gas management system implementation and completion by March or April next year. So that's still very much on point by way of the the proposed schedule. Next slide, please. So the other aspect of the landfill site that's under our direct control from a, I should say, essentially a DART perspective rather than on a ReGen perspective is the clearance of the scrap metals. Our last barge took out about 2,400 tons for recycling. Those of you that have driven up the ETH over the last few years, hopefully will see a significant reduction in the mounds of metal that were on the site. And we're pretty much at a place now where there's one, possibly two final barges to be shipped off site. The residual material, those materials are being sorted now. It's very much smaller style. They're being sorted out by magnets and separated from the residual waste that was also in there. The residual waste will go into the landfill. The metals will be exported, and we're essentially leaving ourselves a clean site, which will actually become an element of it, an expansion area of the landfill as we continue to develop the ReGen infrastructure. But nevertheless, a very much a significantly improved site from both its environmental performance and opportunity for generating broader environmental pollution. Thank you, Rita. By way of project schedule, most of you will see this before. The dates, as in the year dates, really haven't changed. There has been a shift in delay in some elements within the schedule and within those years. And I do have a later slide that shows where we're at in a bit more detail around the key elements. But for all intents and purposes, we still are on schedule with having the energy recovery facility and the other recycling and reuse facilities up and running now at the end of 2026. So that remains our current target. Thank you. Just as a reminder of what ReGen is all about. It genuinely is a green initiative for the entire Cayman community. That's its intent. Moving away from traditional dilute and disperse landfill that's been operating on the site since the early 70s. These are going to be very modern facilities, world-class facilities, generating a significant element of sustainable power, putting about 9 megawatts into the grid. Significant reduction in emissions compared to the existing landfill. So circa 23,000 tons a year, or taking 5,000 cars off our roads every year. Protection of human health is very important with regards to obviously the emissions and environmental effects of the existing landfill over history compared to these modern, fully contained facilities that have very detailed environmental management plans associated with them and operating procedures being developed against current global best practice standards, particularly in the form of the Energy Recovery Facility through the European Emission Directive. And we're generating jobs. The landfill, of course, will ultimately become a green space aligned with other initiatives. It's very important that we do improve on our recycling, reduction and reuse of waste. And of course, from a visual, economic, environmental perspective, we generally believe that site and that area will see very significant improvement over the coming years. Thank you. Quick reminder of what it is we are developing. Essentially, it's a series of integrated facilities that will divert up to 95% of waste from landfill. Energy recovery is the most significant aspect of that. We will be doing recycling of construction and demolition waste, which currently doesn't really take place to any great extent. The main elements of that being obviously the opportunity for steel and steel recycling, and the recycling of the rubble material itself, be it brick, concrete, etc., which is very, very usable as a secondary aggregate as opposed to primary aggregate quarrying on island. End-of-life vehicles and scrap metal recycling, well, that's happening as we speak, and there are new facilities that essentially, once we get rid of the residual materials on island, there's an ongoing service where all vehicles are appropriately depolluted, processed, and then exported for metal recycling. Materials recovery relates to your more domestic, traditional commercial recycling, be it your paper, card, cans, plastics, green waste processing. Well, the composting and mulching facilities are designed currently with an open windrow process. What I would say is there is also an initiative at the moment in early dialogue with the commercial sector, looking at particularly other initiatives that could be looked at regarding green waste processing, residual organic materials that are being generated. And a new medical waste incinerator to replace the existing facility located at the northern extremity of the landfill. Bottom ash processing, sorry, just to don't need to go back, but bottom ash processing really relates to the bottom ash coming out of the energy from waste facility, which post maturation also makes for a very well understood engineered material for secondary aggregate. So there's a lot of opportunities for on island reuse of materials on the back of these processes. But of course, when it comes to the likes of steel, aluminium, paper, card, the economies of scale and the size of the island are never going to generate opportunities for us to develop scalable secondary industries to deal with these materials. So regrettably, export is our principal solution for that. So the earth design in itself, very well-known technology, an understood technology provider. Current boiler capacity is 29 megawatts thermal, managing approximately 120,000 tons per annum, which relates to anywhere between 7.8 and 13 metric tons per hour. The RF design is done in close collaboration with our engineering procurement contractor, which is actually a Greek company with experience, strong experience in this area, working closely with the actual boiler and combustion technology provider, which is Steinmuller. Okay. So the schedule that we're now looking at, sorry, Hannah, hot off the press, I think 31st of October has been busted. So we're now 30 November, 1st of December as the current date. So a month, which a project of this size and nature is not huge in the grand scheme of things. The EIA did go under a period of suspension for a while, just as some of the details were sorted out around the project agreement and progress of the project agreement, but it's up and running, and the intent is it will be completed. It still will be completed in 2023, but the latter part of 2023, which will allow for the commencement of construction. And we have been able to find some uplift or improvement in the construction schedule, which allows that to be completed in 2026. ERF commissioning is always a challenging thing. Things can go very, very well, or things go wrong, or you've got breakages and things like that. So we've allowed ourselves a little bit of bandwidth in that, just through the reality of the situation of developing some quite complex technology and infrastructure, which then obviously leads on to an operational commencement of the end of 2026 or the start of 2027. So that's the schedule as it stands at the moment, with regards to not just the energy from waste facility, but the overall ReGen infrastructure. Some of the challenges, well, I think the last couple of years and the challenges in this particular industry are not just relating to COVID. Ukraine, believe it or not, has had a massive impact, and particularly around supply chain, as quite a number of suppliers that are traditionally located in Eastern Europe were under Russian ownership, which has driven quite a lot of supply chain and logistical revisions and recalculations on that side of things. COVID itself has made things difficult with regards to actually staff availability, be it on the contractor side of things or the consultant side of things. And this project coming together really is a multinational effort with regards to where people are located and are inputting into the project. So it certainly has had its challenges, but I'm pleased to say that the DART consortium, in collaboration with the government, we're continuing to make really good strides forward to make this project a reality and keep it on a timely basis as best as we possibly can. But we've certainly been thrown a few curveballs over the last 18 months or 2 years with regards to putting a project this size together and keeping everybody on the same page. Nevertheless, the intent hasn't changed, and we still believe strongly that it's a very, very positive project for the island. Thanks. Next. So this is, I guess, moving now on to an initiative that's really come into fruition this year. It's essentially really thinking about the cleaner and greener aspect of the Cayman Islands and how we can start to generate a cultural norm and behavioural changes with regards, helping the population and the community understand what they can do, a little bit of education, and really promoting the higher aspects of the waste hierarchy. A lot of this work which is why they're named on this, is undertaken by Pelican Communications, a UK-based company that has been commissioned through the ReGen project. That's undertaken a lot of waste and sustainable initiative communication projects and strategies, and they've proved exceptionally competent in doing so and assisting us along the way. So next slide, please. So essentially, and this has been a couple of years in the offing, I guess, and Hannah's been strongly involved with this initiative, both during her days at DART and then subsequently in a review basis since she's been at the ministry. The ReGen infrastructure does allow us to significantly increase the volumes of recycling. Landfill capacity is obviously important, and we need to minimise waste going to landfill in the interim period. To the previous speaker's points, it's in all our interest to encourage people to improve their recycling behaviour and how they reduce and reuse materials and how they think about that. And we do believe it has the opportunity to deliver significant environmental benefits. So this is essentially the starting point, as I said, of a campaign that is yet to be finally ratified, but I did just want to share some of the outcomes of where we've got to date. Next slide, please. So the bottom, it's a simple title, but it was good that it was on the title for this forum today is Rethink Waste, and that's essentially what we're asking the people of the Cayman Islands to do, and encourage them to do that in different ways. So next slide, please. And again. So the campaign went through a series of consultation processes, both in the form of workshops, in the form of questionnaires, quite an iterative process. There was a lot of the tower undertook the consultation process with the groups. There was 3 groups formally engaged. One was youth, One was essentially the broad parameters of environmental professionals, if I can put it like that, people that have a significant interest. And like I say, a number of the people in the forum today did participate in it. And the other group was industry, businesses on Ireland, and their part to play in this process. And really, it was about coming up with what the core of our message is and what it needs to be, and creating a cleaner and greener Cayman Islands, I think was at the principle of the heart of everybody's desire for that. And then a series of messages that resonated against particular material types and opportunities for benefit, both as an individual and how that message went across to people. So what was going to work? So, was it going to be quite authoritarian, big stick, or was it really driven by a benefit-driven approach as to, well, if you do this, it benefits you in not just improving the environment in Cayman, but it might improve economics, your personal economics, home economics, education side of things. So a broad spectrum of methodologies, and this is where we have currently ended up. So we can quickly run through the next series of slides, Rita, I think, about what we're trying to do. So as I said, we're looking to highlight personal benefit, but also anchoring it in the campaign in Cayman's environment. So simple: reduce food waste and reduce greenhouse gases and improve your home bills. Recycling packaging, keeping the beaches clean, using refillable water bottles, reduce ocean plastic and packaging. And as I say, these are not fully ratified. It still has to go through a formal approval and process. But the hard yards have really been done with regards to developing this campaign, and we hope in the not too distant future we can get the alignment with the Cayman Islands government to get this rolled out as a national campaign and really start to see some of the benefits and improvements from an environmental perspective that it can generate on the island. Thanks, Rita. Mate. These are just some of the methodologies. So I've chopped this down quite a bit that we would look to get the message out there to the community. That's it. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Thank you so much for that presentation, Richard. Really, really interesting information here. We do have some questions about, let's see, we'll start right at the top. Where do the barges go for recycling and who pays for that?
Well, they actually go to a number of locations. It's based on metal pricing at any particular time. Essentially it's a global commodity. So some metal goes to the States, some's gone to a smelter in Costa Rica, and some has gone to South America. So really it's predicated against, essentially there's a contractor on site that does the separation of the metals. The metals get transported onto the barge, and then really based on, of course it's a commercial venture, nobody's doing this as a charity. So we're the opportunity to, based on global metal values, are as an income stream, obviously, for those recyclables. Really then dictates the direction of the barge, ultimately. In essence, though, the site cleanup, the bill ultimately ends up with the Cayman Islands government. So,
okay, and then that revenue from selling the metals is going back to the government as well.
It's actually netted out as opposed to an actual return transaction, but it's netted out. Yeah.
Okay. Can you tell us more about the plans for the top of Mount Trashmore once it's covered? They're asking if there's a bike trail, for example. That was from Claire.
Yeah, this is an interesting. I mean, the honest answer is at the moment there is no detailed design with regards to what we have, and certainly some of the school visits I did earlier in the year was one of the questions I was putting out to the kids that we're presenting to, that, what would they like to see, and be it either bike trails or running parks, or we had zip lines, or we'd all sorts of things. But at the moment, because ultimately the remediation will happen, obviously nothing can happen on site until the entire site is remediated. So we're currently remediating what's called phase 1. There's existing landfill operations that are continuing and will continue until the new infrastructure comes online. That we hope we can get into a process of maybe another interim remediation, as opposed to waiting for the completion of landfilling before we start the remediation of an entire phase 2. So hopefully there might be a phase 1B, but the operational interface with that can be challenging. But post, if you were to say that remediation of the entire site would be completed in, so operations say finish at the end of 2026 for landfilling. The new infrastructure comes online. Remediation starts in 2027. Well, there's probably 18 months or 2 years of remediation for phase 2, just based on how long this one has taken, phase 1. And then you have to have a period of settlements. I mean, given that you do have gas wells on site and everything else, safety is obviously the primary concern. So ultimately, public access is, you could definitely be talking around 27, 28, 2030, 2031, unless the site is, some form of separation is put in. But it has to be saved. So in the first instance, we're greening the mound. That's what it's being planted, and it's being grassed out, and we're greening the mound, and then there'll be a broader consultation process about what best fits with economic sort of support, other businesses or tourism, whatever it might be on the island.
And is that
use.
Would that just be grass, or is there trees getting planted on top of the mound, or is it becoming an artificial hill for all?
Yeah, and essentially that's what it is, right? So you have to be a little bit careful with trees, because obviously the geosynthetic liner is an engineered cap, so you've got to be careful that you're not disrupting that cap by trees that are then setting down deep root systems and essentially breaking or destroying the cap. So ultimately the planting regime has to be done properly with very shallow root structures and things like that. At the moment, our consideration really is principally around grass and some it's all kind of I've lost the word.
Shrubs
and local to the island and things like that. Small,
native plantings, and more about smaller shrubs as opposed to trees and in the like.
Correct.
Okay. The next question: are there plans? Can you tell us more about how green waste will be handled as far as a green waste service for local businesses? And maybe you can as well tell us a little more about the reuse services that are going to be there. Just flesh that out for us a little more as far as how composting will be happening, and then the reuse would be happening. Oh, also, is there will industrial level compost be happening there?
So as part of the ReGen project, there is essentially industrial scale mulching and composting for green waste. And that's great organic matter for soil improvement on the island. When it comes to the initiative I mentioned with regards to the the retail industry and the hotel industry, we're at the very much at the early part of that, and that could be something, an initiative that is done completely independently of ReGen. So it's something that businesses have actually come to us or to me to say, is there any chance you could kind of be a bit of a coordinator or the glue to try and bring us together, and something we're going to look to work with the Chamber of Commerce as well. So I generally don't have any real answers for that at the moment, because we're literally at the part of pulling everybody together to say, well, what are the materials available? What sort of volumes are we talking about? And what sort of, potential technical solutions could we be exploring, and how that would be funded, et cetera, et cetera. So that's an early stage process from that. As I said, ReGen that's that element with regards to composting and mulching and on an open windrow system is locked into the project. So that's happening. And then the second part was
the reuse.
Yeah. On the reuse side of things, there'll be essentially an expansion of the household waste recycling centre. So probably most of you that know, at the entry point of the landfill, there's the area where you can go and drop off materials and things like that.
Right.
The reality is there's a much greater opportunity for that material to be sorted and segregated appropriately and pulled out, so it doesn't actually end up either in the landfill or some lower aspect of the waste hierarchy. So there is an opportunity definitely there that becomes really the front end for reuse for materials that can either be repurposed or literally just somebody's thrown out a bike because their kid's grown out of it, and somebody else can use a bike for their small child, as an example, that sort of thing. So at the very front end of the process with the household waste recycling centre and the design of that's really where the focus of the reuse is.
All right, thank you. And then what are some of the uses for bottom ash was another question.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's one principally, essentially. So the bottom ash, whenever it comes out of the energy from waste process, the first thing we do is pull all the metals out of it. So steel and aluminium get pulled out, and that gets sent for recycling separately. We've then got a bottom ash material that does need to go through a maturation process, which is essentially just an oxidation, open air, an oxidation process. And then principally the use of that material on island really would be as a secondary aggregate, so offsetting primary aggregate in road construction or any kind of use where you might need fill material or that side of things. Okay.
Also, who completed or is completing the environmental impact assessment?
The consultants GHD are completing the EIA. They've been on board with the project right the way through the terms of reference side of things, which obviously got agreed with the government, the DOE, and the Environmental Assessment Board, and now they're essentially fulfilling the obligations of the EIA against that TOR.
Okay. And also being asked, Emily, will a smelter be at the facility to save us having to ship off metals, or to empower us with an export opportunity of usable recycled metal?
Regrettably, no. Smelters are exceptionally large elements of infrastructure. I mean, they really are huge.
Yeah.
They have a huge power demand, and are really developed. The economies of scale for smelters are just not something that the materials we produce, the volume materials we produce in the Cayman Islands could ever support. So no, unfortunately.
Are there regional smelters?
That's what I was just thinking.
The closest one be in the United States? Do you know?
Well, there's none in the Caribbean Islands. Is that what you mean?
Okay, interesting. Right, yeah, that was going to be my question.
Apart from I should say Costa Rica.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah. But like most of the big smelters are obviously in large countries, and many of them now are smelters. Some great stats around obviously smelting and reusing an aluminium can, putting it through a smelter as opposed to producing bauxite, mining the bauxite and producing aluminium a primary resource. So that clearly is a focus to make sure that we do as much of that as we possibly can. They are a significant power user, which is why a lot of smelters now are located in countries where hydroelectric is their principal power source.
Interesting.
Gotcha.
And Catherine is asking, have you considered offsetting the emissions from the ReGen facility and the off-gassing from the old landfill? The National Trust uses offsets to protect our local mangroves.
Yeah, that's actually that's a piece of work that's being undertaken at the moment with regards to the carbon offset for the entire project. So I think we've got a pretty good handle on the existing landfill gas emissions. What we don't yet have is ultimately what the model looks like for the entire landfill. But with regards to the specific use of the offsets generated from that, well, it's probably fair to say, well, it's absolutely fair to say that no, there hasn't been any specific determination as to where they'd be placed. That's just as far as I'm aware. Anyway, that discussion just hasn't been had yet, so because we don't have the full data set.
Oh, okay. But have you talked with Island Offsets, or you're doing that within?
No, so we've there's a consultant, a US consultant's actually been engaged to do a study of what our emissions, or model our emissions, what likely to be, and where what those offsets could generate. Mm-hmm. And then that's obviously that'll go into the Mince machine about best use for those offsets and where they can be utilized for the benefit of Cayman, essentially.
Okay. And also one question here, going forward, how will waste be handled? Like, give us an idea. I'm at my house, I've recycled everything I can recycle, reused everything I can reuse. Is the thought that I'm going to put my recycling curbside and I'm going to put my trash out there, and then what happens with that as it goes to the ReGen facility, or who picks it up? Like, give us an idea of that how that flow happens.
Well, I probably don't want to stand on Richard Sims' toes in that, because as a director of DEH, the expectation currently is that DEH will continue to be the waste collection operator.
Okay.
As and when obviously the various services develop and change on island, their service model will obviously have to change in line with that. So ReGen itself only really encompasses the infrastructure, so the energy recovery facility and all the associated, the composting and material recovery facility and bottom ash and things like that. The delineation is collection remains with DEH,
right, and
ReGen has an oversight or control essentially of all the rest of everything else.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so once it arrives on site, then we saw the diagram of the facility there. There would be what would happen once the stuff arrives.
So I mean, essentially the anticipation is obviously it won't just be DEH delivering to the site. So there will be private sector operators. There will be your landscape gardeners will be delivering to the compost facility. The recyclables will be picked up, will be delivered to the material recovery facility. The general trash will typically, and commercial waste will go into the energy recovery facility. Clinical waste will go into the medical waste incinerator. So obviously there's a weighbridge. So all the material will understand exactly the tonnages of material coming into the site against each material type, and they'll be directed to each facility depending on. But there's a lot in that. Waste acceptance criteria is quite a detailed thing, because obviously you need to keep encouraging people and educating not to contaminate particular waste streams. So if you've got dry recyclables and that needs to go into the material recovery facility, what we don't want is a box full of you know, pizza boxes that are still half full of pizza, or, you know, dog food tins that are still half full of dog food and things like that. So that makes it difficult for the staff working in those sites, but also then makes it difficult for the separation and the acceptance of those materials further down the supply chain by the recyclers and things like that. So there's a lot of detail that obviously goes into the specifics of waste management, and you know, literally from the public's doorstep right the way through to its endpoint in the whatever facility it ends up in.
Excellent, thank you. Who will be in charge of oversight for the EU standards as far as the quality, maintain the quality of the facility?
Yeah, that's an interesting and an excellent question, because essentially we've designed a facility based on current global best practice standards in a jurisdiction that has no regulation associated with it.
Right.
So we've done that on our own bat, essentially. What I can say is that air emission control and air emission data will be available real time, so anybody can dial in and see it. Conversations we've had to date would suggest that the DOE currently maybe don't see it within their remit. So I know there's been high level discussion around generating an air emissions standard for Cayman, and we would strongly support that. Would very strongly support it, because we would like the other industries in the island to be as compliant as we propose to be. And we've got absolutely no concern or fear around regulation in that space. So it's an interesting one at the moment, but for all intents and purposes, we're doing it on a voluntary, transparent basis. So the metrics will be up there. People can go in and see it
and compare that to the standards as listed.
And we'll be held accountable as such. But I guess clearly it kind of, many developed jurisdictions will have an environment agency or some form of regulator that would be overseeing that and doing inspections on it and things like that. But I guess that's just part of the iterative development of environmental policy and regulation on these islands.
Right. We definitely need to update our 25-year-old development plan in order to make sure that such things are in place to deal with the rapid evolution of Cayman. Thank you very much, Richard, for that and for your presentation.